Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, good afternoon. Uh, all of our friends and family, when you come in, let us know you're in. Give us a shout out, say hello, so we'll know that you're there. We are continuing um, for the balance of this year, um, 40 years in ministry, and I'm absolutely blessed in the 40 years I've been able to serve um, and be engaged in the preaching of the gospel. The Lord has blessed me with some wonderful friends and brothers who I love and who are endearing to me. And today is no exception. And I'm grateful that he stopped by. Not like he wouldn't stop by anyway. we didn't have to stream for this to happen. But I'm grateful to have my friend and brother Bishop Tyrone Seals as our special guest today. Glad to see him, Bishop. Man, thank you for being here, Doc. Appreciate you.
I'm so honored to be here with you, Pastor.
Man, we man, we when I I wouldn't go to the long story because if we just talk regular, we're gonna be here forever. If we just talk our regular our
Right,
regular kind of conversation.
right, right.
But let's start. Let's do this. Let's talk about you and because before we get into our friendship part, I really wanted to talk about this. I know I didn't give you a heads up because I didn't want to give you a heads up because I wanted to come from you in a natural way, especially in this climate. You're a native of Las Vegas. You know, you've been here, and not only are you a native, your mother uh, was a person who committed herself to social justice and change in this city. And without her and others who she worked with, a lot of things that black folk enjoy, a lot of school kids, school stuff that happens in the Clark County School District wouldn't happen had it not been for your mother. So let's talk about first of all, you being a native of Las Vegas, and then you growing up here, and let's talk about your mom and the stuff that she contributed in her lifetime.
All right, my mom was on the bus coming from Louisiana on the way to San Francisco, Oakland area where my grandmother lived. And we had a lot of relatives here, so she decided to stop here. And when she stopped on the Greyhound bus downtown, there was a sign that said jobs. Uh, she got off the bus one day and went to work the next day. Needless to say, she never left to get to Oakland, San Francisco, where my grandmother was. And when we were young, struggling, she was the mother of 7 children, 6 were in the home. And she basically raised 6 of us by herself without the assistance of our fathers. And her concern was just not for her, but her concern was for the community and the residents and those mothers that were here. And at that time, welfare was controlled by the county, was not controlled by the state. And there was an evil man, and I won't call his name, but he made sure that these mothers didn't hardly get anything. So my mother organized Clark County Welfare Rights Organization within her living room, and she solicited the help of other parents and other mothers, and a Caucasian lady by the name of Flora Duncan, who was a University Regent at the time. She got into the movement, and the movement began to grow. And when it got traction, my mother had a heart attack. But by then, the foundation was already laid. And she was active in getting food stamps, the food stamp program brought to the state of Nevada. And a lot of people are unaware of that. And she fought, and they marched and had sit-ins. And there's a book on the market called Storming Caesar's Palace, and they allude to my mother and the other women that were out there on the front lines fighting and petitioning and marching. Long before now, they were marching for social justice.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you talk about that. I've heard you talk about your mom and her contributions, and I don't think. First of all, it's probably because of my proximity to you that I know this story, but I don't think people outside of natives know that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Some folk today we benefit,
Right.
and people who move here, this town is mostly transplants,
Right.
who benefit from the social services project.
Right.
Programs, and we can draw a direct line from that program to your mother. Had it not been for her, a lot of the benefits we receive today we wouldn't have, because she fought the good fight. You know what I mean? So
right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with that said, of course, we did grow up here in Vegas. I think it was as hot as it is right now, but being a kid, it doesn't bother you the way it bothers you right now. So yeah, she definitely made an imprint in the state of Nevada and in the city of Las Vegas. And
Yeah.
she was faithful to God and faithful to her church. She was an usher for 75 years.
God almighty.
And she was at her church at least 59 of those years.
Wow. And what church was that?
Pilgrim Rest.
Pilgrim Rest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she was there in 2015. She went on to be with the Lord.
Wow. Wow. She ought to have an usher's wing dedicated to her 50-something years in one church serving as ushers. That's amazing.
And she was in the original organizing of the citywide ushers, and then she ended up being the chaplain. And my mother never joined my church, which was Metropolitan, before it got to be Newburgh. And I'm glad she didn't, because if we started 1 minute after 11 o'clock, she was yelling, "All right, I didn't come over here to stay all day." So she was that type of person.
Yeah.
And if she was in the room, her voice was strong enough, her praying and singing was strong enough, everybody knew she was there.
Right.
She ultimately became a mother to many children that she didn't birth, and she was well loved for her contributions.
That's I'm doing a lot of study about African culture and tradition, and the deeper I study, the more I see that, and I know this is a whole other subject, but it's related. The deeper I study, the more I see, because a lot of critics say that we're disconnected from that tradition, and we have been. We came over here in 1619, and took away our language, our culture, and all that. But there are things that are uniquely African that generation expressed that we were like negligent. This whole idea of adopting people and making them a part of your family, and knowing no strangers, and that's an African thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's funny, because my mother was the same way. She knew no strangers. One day I have a new brother, a new sister. You know what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah.
That's your sister. That's your brother.
Yeah.
I'm like, where does rascal come from?
What's really going on here?
Yeah, what's happening? Why the family keep growing?
Right.
Yeah, that's I mean, there's a connection between that, and then coming from Louisiana.
Right.
Because she came from like the Delhi,
Tallulah.
She came from the Tallulah area. Well, that's all. Isn't that the same, like Waterproof, Tallulah, St. Joe? Yeah. I passed through there one day. I was coming from New Orleans, and I was heading to Shreveport, and I looked at the map. Because you've been here long enough, you know that a ton of people in this town come from that area. Yeah. I'm like, I'm gonna take a diversion. I'm just gonna drive through this area so I can say I've been to St. Joe, I've been to Waterproof, I've been to Tallulah, I've been to Sam Robinson's town, Newellton. I've been there too on the past. I'm too loud. You turn on. Thank you. My technical director said you're not loud enough. Yeah. We're gonna turn you up. Yeah, and that ain't no big area.
No, it's not.
Bam, bam, bam. Stoplight, you in the next town. Stoplight, you in the next town. Yeah. So it's amazing to me that about the migration of black folk who came from Louisiana to Vegas.
Right. I went there too. I was curious, and this was probably like 77. Wow. And I said at that time, ain't nowhere in the world all these people came from this place. No. They must have been hanging on the bridge or something. No.
They came there.
But when we were growing up in our household, the women from the churches, different churches, would go from house to house like they did in Bible days,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have prayer, and they'd be singing and shouting and whatever else they were doing as if they was in church.
Mm-hmm.
And they called them citywide prayer bands, and that's what they would do. They would
Wow.
pray, and all the old ladies, and at that time, believe it or not, my mother was relatively young compared to some of the older ones that had gone on to be with the Lord. But yeah, she laid a solid foundation, which in terms pushed us into church.
Right.
She was always a church goer.
Right.
Know?
You said something that I want to catch on
Mm-hmm.
because we're in this pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been like, people have been having real problems adjusting to not being in the physical space,
Mm-hmm.
and so we having these prayer band meetings in people's houses,
Mm-hmm.
and now we back,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more less, but we back into that
Yeah.
in that situation,
Yeah.
and this marriage between the physical space and the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual space.
Mm-hmm.
God has challenged us to go back home
Amen.
and to have, you know what I mean?
Amen.
I see criticism on one hand, but I see
Mm-hmm.
something else on the other hand. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
forced us to come back home.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like me and you, we sitting in my house.
Right.
We forced to come back
Mm-hmm.
home and bring our religion outside the church and bring it back home.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Well, I just think that maybe this is God's way of purging the church
Mm-hmm.
to see who is who, because the church has become this radical venue, and many of our evangelical friends are supporting the president, and I'm not against any political party. I'm just against right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can conjure up enough will to support a person who does not honor our God in the way that they pretend, then that says a lot about where we're headed as a country.
Wow.
And I got used to having hearing the sounds of women praying and reading the scripture, and just like they were at church. And if the Spirit of the Lord would fall in the house, it fell in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so we grew up in that environment. And then my mother, to keep us on a spiritual mission, every Sunday morning before we went to church, she gathered all 6 of her children around the bed, and she would pray for the week. Us going to school, us being outside praying and playing. She kind of prepared us for the world. You know, she was very strong and believed God. She had faith in God, and there is a fascinating story that I'd like to share. When I was 4 years old, I went out on the porch. We lived in the projects, and the projects to me at that time had a long, long porch. You know, being 4 years old, everything looks big. I walked out on the porch and I saw my mother crying, and I was the type of kid, wherever my mother went, I stayed close to her because I was the last one in the home. All my brothers and sisters were gone to school, and I heard her say, as if, you know, like you and I are here talking right now. She said, "God, you gave me these kids, and I know you're going to make a way for me to feed them." And we had no food, but we didn't know. Because my mother, like your mother and other mothers who grew up in that era, they could stretch a meal. You know, it was not uncommon for us to have leftovers 2 and 3 days. And they would cook enough to feed the family. So that was the morning, that afternoon, one of my mother's long time friends from her home in Louisiana knocked on the door. I'll never forget it as long as I live. And at that time, we didn't have plastic bags. We had paper
bags, right.
And he knocked on the door, and I still hear him in my mind now. He said, "Rosa says the Lord told me to bring you and your kids some food."
Wow.
And he started unloading bags and bags and bags and bags. I don't know if she ever told anybody that she was hungry, but I know the Lord made a way. So that kind of solidified my faith, and I made a conscious decision at that point that I would trust my mother's God. Because that's all I knew.
Wow.
You know.
Wow. That's I hear you tell that story, and it gives me chills. Because when you go through your adult life, and you see what bills are, you see what responsibilities are, you see what your paycheck is, and it's less, it's more bills than paycheck, and then you looking at that deficit, and then you say that I'm making more money than my mother ever made, and then you calculate the kids and how in the world does she afford to feed all of us, and pay lights, and pay, even in the project, that gives greater weight to her faith. Right?
And I got so tired of eating greens and beans, I didn't know what to do. And periodically, maybe once or twice a week, my mom would make some type of dessert. And I loved her banana pudding.
Oh, man.
And so she tricked me one day. She said, well, it wasn't a trick. She was straightforward. She said, unless you eat these mustard greens, you can't have any peach cobbler. And I ate the greens, and my face was all frowned up and stuff. And I was so glad Pastor Clay to get over eating that so I could get to the peach cobbler. I didn't know what to do. But those are just the stories that help build your faith. When you see what God has done for others, then you know that He'll do the same for you.
Right. I grew up in L.A. I'm from Indianapolis. We moved to L.A. in 1975, and in the 70s, man, who was president? Might have been Nixon or Carter, one of those. The Department of Agriculture was passing out food. Passed out cheese. Everybody knows the cheese story. Passing out cheese and all kind of stuff.
Pork in the can.
Yeah. And I'll never forget, I was with my cousin. I was with my cousin Cheryl, and we went down on 50th and Central, not far from New Hope Baptist Church. And there's a park over there. And we went down there. We caught the bus to go down there to get this free cheese. But they had ran out of cheese. All they had was 25-pound bags of pinto beans. So we both got, probably a good 100 pounds of pinto beans back on the bus all the way to the projects. And we ate beans for months and days to the degree that, chili beans, beans and rice, and beans and noodles until we started putting sugar in the beans. But we killed
I've done that
too. Yeah, we did. We survived that. Now, where are the projects that are they still standing here?
They're still standing.
Now that's on off Washington.
Right, Washington and MLK.
MLK, yeah.
McWilliams and 8th Street. They're still there.
Right. Right.
And it was the bridge that brought us over.
Right.
A lot of the growth that's around there now, of course, was not there. And our church, Pilgrim Rest, when I was a little kid, they were located at A and Monroe, and then when they built it in '65, and we marched into the church in 1966, it was the biggest auditorium in Las Vegas.
Get out of town, really?
Yeah, at that time. So,
so Second Baptist wasn't standing.
Second Baptist was standing, but their building was smaller. The old building next to Second Baptist is the original. Well, not the original church, but the church that was built. The original church of Second Baptist was in a tent, and they went into this structure. The Reverend B.T. Mayfield built it, and then they called B.C.L. Coleman. And they stayed in that building until Reverend Davis came, and then they built this huge building.
Wow. I didn't. I know. I've been around you enough to know these names. Coleman's name I heard before. I heard you talk about Coleman. Heard his name before, but I didn't know that. There's a lot of history in this town.
Yes,
man, some people have wrote books. So let me say this before I say what I'm going to say. Some people wrote books, and I've seen a special on PBS here in this town about blacks, African Americans in Las Vegas, and there's a certain kind of illusion about Las Vegas, and the first one that I learned was that it's not as big as you think it is.
Right.
That's the first one, because I moved here in 2000, and so the city was expanding, but by as big as I say it is, when you come from LA and you got a million people in a couple square blocks,
right.
There was no way in the world for me to know everybody, right? Then I come here, and then you get involved in church, and I get involved in work, and then that circle is so small, right? I mean, like, do you know so and so? Yeah, I know so and so because so and so go to Evergreen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right. So that's the illusion of Las Vegas when I moved here was that it was a small town. I mean, it was a big town, but it's really a small town. It hasn't changed that much. But having said that, I want to say this: there's a rich history about because I got another friend, Garland, who's been here forever. He told me stories about all the streets on the west side being dirt streets. And
trading cards.
Yeah. And he would jump on the side of a car with the running board and catch a ride from 8th Street to Pentecostal, because that's where the church he went to as a kid, getting a ride to church, and then get out, step on dust, and then walk into church dust. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of history that needs to be told, documented in the archive, which somebody probably did. So if you listen to this and it exists, I would love to hear about it and share that story, that part of Las Vegas' rich history. Not far from New Revelation was a hotel that black entertainers, you know the history better than I do.
The Cove.
It's called the Cove?
Cove Hotel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now where was that at?
That was on the corner of Jackson and D Street.
Okay.
It was a huge hotel. I mean, if that hotel still stood, it would be as tall as probably the Fremont.
Wow, really?
It was that big, and it was jumping back in the days. All of Jackson Street was like the black man's strip. They had Chinese restaurants, supper clubs, you name it, it was on Jackson Street. And back in the days when the city was redlined, they would not allow Sammy Davis to stay on the strip. He could entertain with the Rat Pack, but he couldn't stay on the strip. So when the show was over, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Joey Bishop, all those guys would go to the West Side and party with Sammy.
Wow.
And what a lot of people don't understand, Frank Sinatra himself made an impact because he went to the city fathers and the powers that be in the hotels, and he said, if Sammy can't perform and stay out here, we're not going to perform.
Wow.
So we slowly started, and by that time, historically, they had already built the Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge was very successful for maybe about 2.5 to 3 years. All the entertainers, Count Basie, so many others were at the Moulin Rouge. It was the first black-owned casino, and of course, in years to come, they got others. But it was like the big thing. And so when integration finally came to the forefront, when our people decided that they could go downtown or to an area called the Strip, then they kind of left the black properties abandoned. You know.
Wow, that's an archetype of the effect of desegregation across this country. You know, Black Wall Street. There are bastions of little towns across America that segregation took all the revenue out of. You know what I mean? You know, blacks started going to white stores, and those mom and pop stores closed, and black banks closed, and law firms closed, and all that kind of stuff. And that's a whole another commentary. But that
and even where New Revelation is standing right now, that used to be a store called the Ranch Market.
Oh, get out, really?
Yeah, it was a store first.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then after the store, the Muslims moved in. There was a Muslim temple. After the Muslims moved out, a few years later, it was a funeral home. And now it's New Revelation Baptist Church.
Wow. See, I knew about the funeral home part.
Yeah, it was one of our main stores.
Yeah, I knew about the funeral home part. I didn't know it was a grocery store.
Yeah, and directly across from New Revelation, to the right, if you're coming out, across the street on that very corner of F and Van Buren, there was a gas station there.
Wow.
And across the gravel from where New Revelation is on F Street, there was a strip mall there. Barbershop, Sunrise Cafe, all those. And the area was thriving for us.
Wow.
You know, everything you needed was right there. The barber, the beauty shop, you know, the restaurants. The Cotton Club was on Jackson, where True Vine Baptist Church is right now.
Right.
And across from True Vine, there was another gas station, and behind that gas station wall was a little malt shop. That was not very big, but a lot of people used to go there and get malts and food and stuff like that. And it was owned by a holiness guy by the name of Pastor Clay Johnson.
Wow.
So the history uh, here is very rich. It was not uncommon that you would come to the West Side because that's the only place they had to go and see all the black entertainers on Jackson.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow. I knew that story. I knew part of that story
Mm-hmm.
just by, being around you and other people who are, been either native Las Vegas or been here a long period of time. And that story is only told in pieces. Like I see when to be fair, I did see a PBS special on that a few years ago. But I was reading up on Red Fox and his move to Vegas. And that led to the other black entertainers and would come to town, lean the horn and all them. They would stay on the West Side.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that made me start digging into, well, how come they wasn't at the, you know what I mean? How come they, you playing at the dunes, but you can't stay at the dunes, right?
Couldn't even go in the front door of a hotel if you were black.
Wow.
If you were an entertainer or work at the hotel, you would have to go through the back door and exit through the back door. You weren't allowed to sit down and eat with them. You could wash their dishes and make the beds and do whatever maintenance required. But as far as congregating with them, it was forbidden.
Now, is there truth to a curfew?
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
It may very well have been, but I know that on the corner, D Street is very famous, the same street that the old New Jerusalem is on. In one of the buildings over there, it's a church now. It used to be called the Brown Derby. It was a infamous black nightclub. A lot of people got killed around the Brown Derby.
Yeah.
They had guys that had reputation that would kill you and nothing was ever done about it.
Wow.
So yeah, the town, this was a problem. When blacks started migrating here, a lot of blacks came here because they were building the Hoover Dam. And to take a guy from the South who's making $2 or $3 a week and come here and make money, they invited other people to come.
Right.
And then from when Hoover Dam was finished, then they developed Nevada Test Site. And a lot of African American male and females worked at the test site and they were making good money. So this was a very attractive city as far as revenue is concerned.
I think the test site gave a lot of people jobs and opportunity.
Right.
And today, some of our brothers and sisters who worked at the test site are suffering from the residual effect of radiation.
Right.
And some have gone on to be with the Lord, and that's they basically gave their lives, to survive. And some of these families are dealing with that, those effects today. But yeah, that West Side, because everybody asks me this question. If they come here and they visit and they've been here any amount of time, I get less of it now. But when I first moved here, it was like and I never thought about it until I moved here because I was coming back and forth to Vegas because John Henry, the late John Henry, was my godfather's uncle. Want to know why is all of the black churches on one side of town? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, that was easy. We were basically redlined.
Right.
And when people started migrating here from the South, they stayed off of Boulder Highway. In an area called Pittman, which is close to where Community Baptist Church is, and an area off Sahara and Boulder Highway they call 4 Mile. They had at least 4 to 5 black churches in 4 Mile. And when you went further west, we could not stay downtown. So they had everybody boxed into a certain area. And that was from Bonanza to Cary to MLK, which was called Highland at the time, and on down further east, where we were all boxed into one area because we couldn't live nowhere else.
Wow.
And we did all of our business within our community.
Right.
Our grocery stores, of course, barbershop, beauty shops, Larry Sight and Sounds, which has been here for years and years and years. Larry was the first successful music store. That's when people were still
buying LPs. Yeah. Our daughter is now in the LP business. She's getting LPs and playing them.
Right.
Yeah, without that context, it make it, that explains why, because why there are all the black churches were concentrated on one side of town, and all you have to do is really, if you were here long enough, pay attention to see
Right.
where the anchor churches are.
Right.
The
Right.
anchor Church of God in
Right.
Christ, the anchor Baptist
Right.
churches, the historic churches,
Right.
they're there
Right.
because black folk could only live
Right.
in certain areas of Las
Right.
Vegas. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even churches that were formed basically out of disagreements. They would have a falling out,
Yeah.
and a guy would take 2 or 3 people and go up under a tree and organize a church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an actual fact and true story.
Right.
So that's why we ended up with more churches on the west side. It was where Pentecostal Temple is. That was called the Upper Room Church of God in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a Powerhouse on Adams. Next to Powerhouse was Pilgrim Rest. We had Bethel, which was in a small building, New Jerusalem, which was in a small building. But Second Baptist and Pentecostal Temple back in the day were the 2 biggest auditoriums.
Right.
And things were getting to spread out. We were getting to move further north and further west, and we started expanding our churches.
Right.
We never did go too far eastward, but west and north, a lot of us started migrating into those areas.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Man, I'm glad I talked to you.
Mm-hmm.
You tell me all this stuff all the time,
Uh-huh.
but a lot of people don't get Vegas history.
Right.
Vegas is kind of overlooked,
Right.
especially overlooked in terms of civil rights movement.
Right.
The kind of what's like undercover, not undercover.
Yeah.
What's the word I want to use? I'm trying to be nice.
Yeah.
It kind of hidden
Right.
Jim Crow that was
Right.
going on. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
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 Because most people think once you go to the west, you don't have all of that kind of stuff.
This was the Mississippi of the West.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I was waiting on. That's what I was waiting on.
That's what we've been tagged.
Right. Right.
And so they had. I remember the first 3 black policemen. Mr. Moody, Larry Bolden, he's passed away, and Reverend Charles Wyatt, he's passed away. He ended up being the founder of First African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Is that right?
Yeah, Charles Wyatt. So there's a lot of rich history. And then, since the blacks were in their own neighborhood, Reuben Bullock opened up Reuben's Supper Club, which was a nice dining facility and nightclub, and that's on the corner of 8th and Owens, and just not even 100 feet away, there was a little restaurant called Humdinger.
The Humdinger.
You could go there, or Hamburger Heaven.
Oh yeah, I heard that.
Second Baptist, and across the street from Bakery. Those were like our main things, and then we slowly started going to Wonder World and Vegas Village and other big places. But we did a lot of business within our own community. We didn't have a choice.
Right, because we were, squares in
Right.
and isolated from the rest of Las Vegas. That over time is stretching out and growing. Right. And yeah, that answers that question, because you one of the people who asked me that question. Why is all the churches open? That answers that question.
Yeah.
Because when we would come here in the 80s, the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, when my godfather discovered his uncle, because they didn't know each other. John Henry didn't know all of his brothers and sisters. He didn't even know he's his nephew. And then James Cleveland is the one that connected them.
Right. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So we started coming to Vegas, and we would fellowship at New Light. It might be Federation of Choirs, and we'd be at Second Baptist, and then leave Second Baptist and go to, at that time, the late Donnell Horn was at St. James. We'd go to St. James, and then we'd do the whole Vegas West Side circuit. Right.
Our church community was very, very powerful. On the first Sunday, everybody knew it was citywide ushers. Second Sunday was citywide mission. The fourth Sunday was Federation. Back in those days, Federation was a big, big deal, because all of the churches, the big ones, the upcoming churches, everybody would have their choir there, and they didn't sing mass. Everybody sang their own songs, and it was like the thing to go to.
Yeah.
Fourth Sunday, Federation of Choirs, man, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
yeah, yeah. I remember going.
Yeah.
I remember visit this town, and
Yeah.
Voice of the Watts would go,
Yeah.
uh, and we'd be on that slate as a special
Right.
guest.
Right.
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 And that was a big, yeah, it was a bit, and that church was packed out. There was
Right.
not an empty seat
Right.
in the building.
Right. It
Yeah,
would not be.
yeah, not an empty seat in the building, and that's the kind of community gathering,
Right.
that cross denomination,
Right.
and it's less of that now.
Oh.
And we can talk about 1,000 reasons why, but it's less of that now. But I remember that. I
Right.
remember coming to Vegas, and we just
Right.
knew that if we came on the fourth Sunday, that we were going to be singing.
Right.
Right.
When Pastor Sam Roberson, and I know you mentioned it,
Yeah.
you mentioned it earlier, but Sam Roberson and Owen Graham were the two main promoters in this city. And everybody that was somebody, James Cleveland, the O'Neill twins, and so many others came here because of Sam Roberson. He was the promoter.
Right.
Reverend Graham would do a few of the quartets, but Sam would get all the main singers here. And when the church wasn't big enough, on West Orange, we had an auditorium called the Pan Afro Auditorium. And
Oh,
we
right.
had a lot of major concerts in that auditorium.
Wow.
But Sam was the promoter. He wasn't preaching then. When he was doing a lot of that. But of course, he continued while he was preaching. But he was a quartet singer.
Wow.
And he had a vision and started promoting, and eventually got a record store and robe shop.
Bookstore.
Yeah. So he made a significant contribution to our churches in Las Vegas.
Right. That goes without saying. A lot of people who visit Las Vegas. Hey, Tony. Tony Jordan says, hey, see you, Pastor Seals. That says a lot. Earlier we mentioned Sigmund Joyner, and one story he tells all that I talk to him. If I talk to him any length, this comes up every time. And this is the impact that senior preachers have on young preachers, and we need to take care of. And that is, when he started preaching, Sam opened his store and let him have books. That has never left his eye. If we talk over an hour, that story gonna come up.
Right.
That's an impact on a young preacher,
Right.
and an indelible impression on him in his formative years as a preacher that you can never erase in his mind.
Right.
I know for me it was Tyrone Skinner when I was a young preacher. I was about 16 years old, and he's like, man, I see you preaching, but you better get these books. And he gave me some books. I bet you Skinner don't even remember this, right? And that made an impact on me. Yeah, and Sam, I'm sure he's probably aware of it, but I don't know to what depth he's aware of it. But that made an impact on him.
Yeah.
When he tells the story about Sam going to the bookstore, getting him books. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the day, man. And those preachers here were preachers of power. Because whoever the mayor was or the governor was, at that particular time, they wouldn't do nothing on the west side unless they came to the preachers.
Wow.
Because they were basically the power brokers. Mayor Gregson, Senator Bryan, Harry Reid, Bob Miller, Michael Callahan, all of those guys, Grant Sawyer. All of them would come in and talk to.
That's crazy. You call these names like. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because these names are icons.
Yes.
In Nevada history.
Right.
To the degree that you go to the state building, it's called the Grant Sawyer Building.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You mentioned Senator Bryan. Senator Bryan, because I listen to a lot of PBS. Senator Bryan does like a history of Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And then some of these names are school names.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But those are the power brokers who had, if they're going to do something on the west side, they had to come through the preacher. That was true in L.A.
Yeah.
It was when I was a kid. That was true in that. I remember when Maxine Waters was running, and all of the preachers getting behind her to push her for Congress. I remember that as a young preacher. It's less of that today, but But so having said that, let me move to the subject that I want to talk to you about, because you and I'm, you my friend and my brother. I probably never said this, but I'm proud of the position and stance that you take. We don't agree on everything, so let's be clear. We're not rubber stamping. Right. You have a position in terms of, before I get to the politics part, preachers and importance and hierarchy and that kind of stuff, right? You say even of your own title, it's just a title. It ain't in my head. And I see you repeating this thing over and over and over again. I know I'm going down a different direction, but this whole self-importance about the clergy, you avoid it and you talk about it and you criticize it. And I applaud you for it. Because somebody need to say something. You know what I mean? And you saying it. Now we servants. We not, you know what I mean? Right. You might be calling yourself apostle, you might be calling yourself bishop, but we all here. Right. Just speak on that for a little bit and then we'll go to
Well, I often mention how the church has evolved, and the evolution has not always been for the good. Of course, in the 60s, everybody was just preachers. The 70s, they went to evangelists. The 80s, a portion of the 90s, they went to prophets. Everybody was a bishop, and now everybody wants to be an apostle. And I don't get that. Folk been in church 2 years, and all of a sudden, they're apostle somebody now. It's very thought-provoking. So, and you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, we're all servants. And the way I look at things, it's like when we were born, the title wasn't on the birth certificate, and when we die, it's not going to be on the death certificate. And that's what we're not grasping. We're just, I coined this phrase called titleishness. And that's what's happening now. Everybody wants to be important. But it's not about us. Rick Warren, in his book, Purpose-Driven Church, and I always refer to this book, in the first chapter, he says it all begins with God, and it's not about you. And that's, I cling to that. It's not about me. It's about God. The preacher, and you've been at this for 40 years, and thank you for your service, we're the mailman. We're delivering what we got from God and what we got from our experiences, and we deliver it to our congregation to give them life and to give them purpose. So it's not about us. We just, it's just weird. Everybody is important.
Wow. What I don't get into the, the existential part of it, where they come from and the whole thing. I'm just proud of your stance on that. That's a theme. You bring that up, and you make sure this. Let me say this. I'm gonna get to the subject I want to talk about. And I know if we start this subject, this is a whole nother hour for you. Tyrone Seals is known by everybody in this town. When I say everybody, I mean everybody. When I moved to this city, Tony said Seals often stood alone in the truth while others stood fleecing and on popularity. When I came to the city, to back up, and I couldn't find a job. I was a computer person, couldn't find a job nowhere, and you took me on and you got me a job at the mortuary. And one day we got to tell that story without calling names. And you got me a job at the Flamingo Hotel. I was there for 11, 12 years doing weddings, and and I remember it's either Richard or Dave said that Tyrone knows everybody, right? And I remember going home. I remember saying that's ringing in my mind. I'm like, maybe just know every church person, every black person. It might have been Richard. Tyrone knows everybody. I'm driving home. I'm thinking about that. Maybe he know all the preachers. Then I come in the house. There's they get ready to sell the house that we were renting, and they're appraisers. And I come in my suit on. It's 115 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, where you been with the suit on? I said, well, I do weddings at the da-da-da. She said, do you know Tyrone? Now, this white woman. Oh, my. Seals? Yeah, do you know Ty? Yeah, I know Ty. Well, I went to school with him. I know him since that. I remember going back to work and telling man, dude, you know everybody. Everybody in this town. They be Muslim, they be black, they be Asian. You've been here long enough and you don't know Tyrone Seals. Something wrong with you.
Yeah.
But this other subject that if anybody follow you on Facebook and they not blind, they know that you are adamant about the political environment that we in today. And you have not, to your credit, have not just started talking about this. You've been talking about this since this administration been in office, from day one to day now. You know, and lately there's been I don't know why lately, but you've been talking about it for the longest. This exposure of this division, this ironic division between our dominant culture brothers and sisters who claim Christianity, being silent about all of the stuff that's going on with 45, and then those of us whose eyes are open, and you've been calling them to task. I know people are doing it today, but you've been doing it.
Right.
You've been doing it for the longest.
Right.
Just speak on that for a minute.
I kind of got interested in politics at an early age, even when Senator Bryan and various others were campaigning. I would get me a job working for them, passing out literature and going to different places with them. So I had a keen interest in politics, and by my mother being who she was and knowing all the politicians like Senator Joe Neal, his mom was from Tallulah. She was a good friend of my mother, so I kind of got an interest in it, and I just kind of watched things. I remember as if it was yesterday, April 4th, when Dr. King got killed. That kind of opened my eyes because, you know, I seen black people crying. I mean, literally, not just saying, oh, Dr. King, but I mean really crying, because he was, in the 60s, the hope for black people. He was, in many ways, a black messiah for us. So I kind of got into politics, and I watch trends and I watch how things have changed. And I'm very interested in how the future is going to reflect on my children. So that's why I'm abreast of everything that's going on in the nation. And right now, I always try to stress this point that this race isn't just about Democrat and Republican, but it's, unlike Joe Biden, this is for the soul of our nation. We've always had racism. It'll calm down, but then it'll come back up again. So I think, like you and many others, that incident in Charlotte, when our president said there are good people on both sides. There are good people when you hate folks. Or when you try to destroy them, or try to kill them.
Right.
And oftentimes, my pastor, I'll hear some racist people. They don't ever say it to me, but I'll hear it in commentaries and stuff, and they'll use statements like, "Go back where you come from." And I'll be trying to get them to understand, we didn't come here on a voluntary basis.
Right.
We were sold into slavery, beat, and brought here, and a lot of our ancestors died in the water, in the lakes, in the oceans, coming here. So to tell us to go back where you come from, when y'all brought us here against our will, that's a stupid statement to me.
Right.
You follow me?
Right.
So if we come here on a voluntary basis, oh, we just want to go to America or whatever, it would have been a different situation. So of course I pay attention, because I want to know what's going to happen. You know, because right now we have a spineless Senate. You know, Trump can go out, like he said, and shoot somebody on Fifth Street, and people will still support him. And he's absolutely right.
Right. It's a scary notion.
It is.
It's a scary notion to consider 4 more years of this administration.
Right.
To forecast it to the level, because now you got 4 more unchecked years.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You just got 4 more. You got 4 more unchecked years where he's been playing with law.
Right.
pushing the Constitution into place and not expanding the presidential powers in a way
Right.
that have never been expanded before.
Right.
You know, usurping what the rules are for the executive branch, the Congress and Senate,
Right.
and our Supreme Court. I mean, listen,
Right.
this made me mad. I want to say another word, but I can't say it because I got my church shirt on.
Uh-huh.
I'm driving home. I'm listening to the interview with Wolf
Blitzer.
and Attorney General.
Uh-huh.
The Attorney General says, when asked, is there institutional racism? He says, I don't believe that there is institutional racism. And then he see him kind of massage all the craziness that Trump does. I just almost pulled over my car. I'm like, how can there not? What world do you live in?
Right. Right.
Especially in the world of Jewish prudence, where you don't see that there was a system set up and designed from day one to day now,
Right.
that has distributed justice unequally and unfairly, and it has been pushed by an institution. If it's been pushed by an institution, doesn't that make it systematic?
Of course.
That's just, I mean, how can you be an intellectual? How can you be a jurist?
Right.
And at least not admit to listen, it exists.
Right.
This would be fair. Yeah, it exists.
Right.
It was designed for that.
Right.
You know what I mean? But we need to look to do blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Or not.
Right.
Just be honest and say, no, we ain't gonna fix it because we believe that Negroes deserve what they get, whatever. But
it's subservient.
Yeah. That just blew. I mean, how do you? I know the answer. This is just a rhetorical question. I just don't get how people can see that and to divorce themselves of the reality.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
You went to law school. You went to an Ivy League school. You're an intellectual. You're a student of history.
Right.
But then, under the guise of this current administration, you recast and reshape history and change the narrative to be something else that it wasn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they pretend, and I say this in all honesty, a lot of them pretend like they don't know what's going on, or either they turn a blind eye to it because it's not affecting them. Donald Trump has got to be the worst president of our lifetime. And he's given a voice and a rise to the racists. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And he doesn't care. He'll insult a woman, he'll insult a person in the military, he'll insult a Mexican, an Indian, whatever. And of course, you know, he got into office because he played on the fears of America. He was questioning whether or not Barack Obama was born in the United States.
Great. Yeah.
And he kind of rode on that wave. You know, how do we go from a super intelligent black man to a narcissistic idiot in a white man? I have white friends that I love dearly, and you do too.
Right.
And this isn't about racism, man. This is about right and wrong. Right.
And I don't know. Biden may be right. It's for the soul of America. He may be right, but then I question the soul.
Yeah.
I mean, it presupposes there was a soul in America. Yeah. I'm listening. There's a guy at Howard University, Dr. Carr, and somebody asked him the question about the importance of voting and the application of law. And some Dr. Carr said that rang with me. I knew it was true. I just, you know, the climate makes it more relevant. We didn't need a 1965 Voting Rights Act. We didn't need a 19th Amendment for suffrage to vote for women. We had a Constitution. And if followed by its letter and even its intent, that the language was enough to say it is unconstitutional to deny you a right to vote based on your skin color, based on your gender,
Right.
we didn't need an act. But we got an act,
Right.
Civil Rights,
Right.
Voting Rights Act 1965, Civil Rights Act,
Right.
Housing Act. We got all of these acts, and we didn't need them really because we had a Constitution. But what he did raise is this. This is very important. This is why we need to get out and vote. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Is that the law is only good as the interpretation of it and the application.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even know if you remember when Justice Borg was getting ready to be confirmed. And this whole idea about law and how to interpret it, and I, kind of glossed over my eyes, and I'm like, oh, this is some boring stuff. And now that I think about it, man, that's important. It's another reason why a more rational, reasonable mind need to be in the White House than it's in the White House today. Not saying we're going to, this is I'm saying this is an absolute nutcase.
Right.
Who's been given the keys to the code to the missile launch.
Right.
Who's been complicit with Russia.
Right.
You remember the biggest enemy of Ronald Reagan was Russia.
That's right.
Where's the Reagan Republicans?
That's
right.
Right? Nowhere. Silent.
Been invaded by midgets.
Silent.
Yeah. Where the Reagan Republicans? Where they at, Doc?
I think other presidents realized that we were supposed to be one nation under God. Richard Nixon was one of the worst presidents in the world.
No doubt.
Not because of his stance against the people, but because he was crooked.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? He did stuff that he should not have done, and I'm sure that all of them have. But this guy does even when he gave his acceptance speech for the nomination on the White House grounds, it violated certain portions of the Hatch Act. But they're not going to say anything because I guess they fear his supporters, which is crazy to me. Now, the guys that aren't in the Senate and the Congress anymore, they're speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
God bless John Kasich out of Ohio. He's not standing back going, I'm going to put it with this.
Right. The late Senator from Arizona,
John McCain.
You can't. I can't agree with McCain's politics the whole of his career.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just it is what it is. But at least the man had some measure of integrity.
Right.
When they were coming down with the birther issue.
Right.
And they were campaigning against Obama, and somebody in the audience, this is more on the Christian issue, said Obama's not a Christian, that he's a Muslim. And he said, no, ma'am, no, that's absolutely not true. It's absolutely not, no. You can't say that.
Right.
No, that's not true. The man was, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Instead of feeding the crazy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And the reason I bring that up, I think, maybe I'm wrong, that there is, once you get to a certain level of leadership, it ought to come with a kind of austerity, some kind of ethic.
Right.
We can disagree.
Right.
The history of America is replete with senators and congressmen who battled it out in Congress and called each other and even shot each other during sessions.
Right.
But then if one of them died, they all at the funeral talking about what a great statesman this person was and da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
We can't get the president to go to John Lewis's funeral.
Oh, no. He says because he didn't come.
He didn't come to my inauguration. What? This is United States congressman who got the life beat out of him during the Civil Rights Movement. That's one of the, but you want me to vote for you.
Right.
Or you want me to vote for Kanye.
Right.
One of the two.
Right.
Which I ain't doing either one.
Which is a joke as well. So yeah, we're living in these times, and I'm finding more and more that the church leaders aren't standing up. We're being silent.
And have been. What mystifies me, among other stuff, is the kind of equivocation that goes on. In other words, I'm right, evangelical, fundamentalist, moralist, and I'm supporting a president who called African countries a shithole nation.
Right.
Who said that most of the aliens, legal or otherwise, coming from Mexico are MS-13.
Right.
build a wall to separate us. Build a wall in the South, but don't build a wall in the North.
Right.
I mean, and the list goes on. Grab women
Right.
by their, you know,
Right.
it's okay to
Right.
grab women by their private parts, and the
Right.
list goes on and on and on. Who had a
Right.
history,
Right.
you know, history of being slumlords and
Right.
housing discrimination,
Right.
and son-in-law is guilty of the same thing.
Right.
And you get to go, you go to church on Sunday and stand in front of your Christian congregation and say to your Christian congregation,
Right. Support this
man.
Insanity. Well, you know, even in biblical times, Israel wanted a king.
Yeah.
They got Saul, so we got us a Saul.
Yeah. Well, I didn't vote for it. I don't want to Saul.
Absolutely.
I didn't want him at all. I didn't want him at all.
Absolutely.
My point is that we got to stop, because me and you could talk for 5 hours. We may need to reconsider.
Right.
That you don't have to agree with me, Bishop. This is Donald Clay talk. We may need to reconsider and reevaluate whether or not these people deserve to be called Christian, because the tenets of what a Christian is being undermined by your politics.
Amen.
You know what I'm saying? You can't say I'm Christian. Jesus said, "I'll come that you might have life and have it more abundantly," and then out of your next breath, support a president who's trying to take life.
Right. Right.
And I'm not talking about abortion, right? I'm talking about life after abortion. That's a whole nother. I'm talking about setting up a country that will mirror a classless, a two-class system: the rich, the poor.
Right.
The middle will be squeezed together, and there'll be a divide.
Right.
Because we'll keep feeding the corporations, and we'll overlook. You know what I mean?
Right.
Is that Christian?
I would say not. I think one of the greatest life lessons for me was when I was in Europe.
Oh, that's right.
And because I had come from America to go visit, you know, multiple times in Europe, and I'm thinking, oh, when I go there, these people are going to be prejudiced. But it's shocking, they weren't. The German people were very nice. They were very helpful. I went downtown. They were playing all black music, and they were just. I would go into a store, and nobody was looking at you funny. And I'm saying, I'm in Europe, you know. And I rode down the street, Pastor Clay, and I was riding with a bishop friend of mine, and I said to him, "Where are all the homeless people?" He said, "We don't have them." He said, "Because if we find a person that's homeless, we have special buses that go out, pick them up, take them to a hotel, clean them up, feed them, give them clothes, and reintroduce them to the workforce. And they have universal health care."
I'm looking at there's a wave and a move afoot of African Americans who are moving and repatriating to Africa. This is not Donald Clay, Marcus Garvey back to Africa. I'm gonna make a point.
You're right.
And it's a struggle because you come from the West and then you go to Africa. There's certain amenities that you won't have. It's not the same Africa that people think is with the jungles. It's not that Africa.
Right.
But what they and I've been studying this stuff for the past 2-3 months. What they are saying is that beyond all of the stuff is the relief of the anxiety and the pressure of living in America under the microscope. To be in a country and a place, you just said it of Germany, to be in a country and a place where I'm not suspect just by being. Not by being guilty, just by being.
And they brought it to we picked their cotton, worked in their fields, raised their children, made up their beds, cooked their food, swept off the porch, served them, and now you're afraid of us?
Right. No, they've always been afraid. I'm sorry. They've always been afraid.
That's
they've always been afraid.
That's garbage.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
We'll have to continue.
Man, we gonna have to.
Amen.
We got to do it, but we got to do it before November. So
Amen.
I do want to say this while Bishop is here.
Yeah.
And I've been emphasizing it at our church, and I know you have been too. We getting ready to vote, and there is a move afoot. There is a deliberate move to rob you of your right to vote.
Absolutely.
There was a move. Georgia just eliminated over 200,000 registered voters from their rolls. purging the roads. There are these laws and rules and regulations in place to so it wherever you listening from, go. I think my wife has a web page. I'll stick it up after this.
Okay.
That you can go and you can check your voter registration. You type your
Right.
name in
Right.
and the whole shot to see whether or not you are registered to vote.
Right.
And then there's a timeline on
Right.
sometime in October. It depends on the
Right.
state. That if you're not registered to vote by this certain amount of time, then you won't be eligible to vote in the election.
Right. Right.
So I want to say, in the presence of the Bishop, please, sir, please, ma'am,
Yeah.
check your voter registration.
Amen.
You know,
Amen.
check. It is critically important.
Amen.
You know.
And on a final note, Herman Cain was one of the stars of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
He died. They don't even mention his name at the convention. So what does that tell you? Then you got a token, Dr. Ben Carson. Oh, okay. We'll talk about it.
Man, we can spend 15 years on Ben Carson.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
that's again, it's critically. I'm super proud of our daughter and Trudy, who took care of their voter registration from California to here. And please check. Don't take for granted that you are accurately registered.
Right.
Go check it.
Right.
If you're in Nevada, you go to the Nevada website. There's a lot of fake sites, so just make sure that the site's not fake. Got to be .gov.
Right.
Make sure it's not a fake. There's a lot of fake sites out there saying that they do voter registration checkups, and you be giving your information to, to something else.
Right.
And there's a deliberate move afoot from foreign infiltrators.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. We got the Russians involved.
Right.
The Chinese are involved.
Right.
This stuff is not rumored. They are really involved. So check your source of your registration information. Make sure it's a legitimate source, and get your registration together so that you can vote. And thank God we're in Nevada.
Amen.
Because we get to vote early.
Amen.
We get to vote by mail.
That's right.
We get to vote by absentee ballot. Thank God we're not in Alabama.
That's right.
Texas.
Right.
Louisiana.
Right.
Mississippi.
Right.
All right. So,
amen.
Anything you want to say on that, Bishop?
No, I'm just glad to be here with you, and let's do it again. Let's do the Staples seconds. All right.
We're gonna do it again, man.
Amen.
Listen, Doc. I love you with everything that I have, man. I just want to say that in a public way. Thank God for Bishop Seals. He is a preacher's preacher. He loves the work of the ministry, the men and women of God. There is no such thing as a preacher enemy of his. Not in this town. I've seen him help people who dogged him.
Amen.
We got to come back and talk about that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about him like a dog, and he in trouble. He stand up at the church next to him and supporting him, man. That's just you are a dying breed. Yeah. And I hate to say that. He's also, we didn't mention, is an entrepreneur in this town and a supporter of our community. There used to be a time in our cities where a black preacher had death and loss in the church. Used to be able to, in LA, we used to be able to reach out to Harrison and Ross, or Ashley and Grisby, or it was a small list. Right. My member passed away, and this is the situation we need help, and we should be able to call and pick up the phone and say, talk to him, and then we make some arrangement. That day is almost over. Save you and a handful of people, not just in Vegas, across this country.
This is true.
Across this country, it's just amazing to me the franchise of mortuaries, that been bought up by corporations. Right. That's got faces that look like ours, like black and brown faces, but they're really corporations. You got nobody to talk to.
That's right.
But I'm grateful to God that we got Tyrone Seals. You know what I mean? So if you in need of that service, or you planning to take care of your needs in the future. And listen, we all got to leave here.
Amen.
And when you leave here, you come here, you create a debt. And when you leave here, you leave a debt.
That's right.
Right? So we need to take care. Man, thank you, Bishop.
All right.
Anything you want to say for us when we get out of here?
No, just God bless you all, and thank you.
All right. All right. Thank y'all. We'll be back to our members. We'll see you on Tuesday night for our member check-in. And for the rest of you all, we'll be on Wednesday night. We're talking about Christian responsibility in our political environment. Thank